High achieving ladies, I am going to reveal something that'll give you back hours of your time and dramatically cut your stress, particularly at work. I want you to stop trying to solve problems that aren't yours to solve. Now, in this video, I'm going to explain to you what I mean by that. And my guess is if you have been feeling stressed, overwhelmed, on the verge of burnout, then you're probably doing it. And I'm also going to give you a 4-step process for unraveling that behavior. So let's get started. Now, first, before I go any further, if you're new around here, my name is Jen Costanza. I am a holistic burnout recovery coach, and I work with high achieving women, women leaders, professional women who want to prevent and heal from burnout without giving up everything that they've achieved in their career and in their life. So, what I'm going to be talking about today is actually a pattern that I've seen in a lot of women that I've worked with. This whole phenomenon of trying to solve problems that really aren't yours to solve and that you ultimately cannot solve. And so I want you to ask yourself, while I am going through this, am I doing this? I want you to really be asking yourself that. And I want you to just let you know that this is a behavior, like I said, super common, but it's one that you can train yourself out of with some reflection and strategic thinking. And it really opens up so much space in your life, so much more energy that you can then redistribute to areas where you're going to have the most impact. So, getting into it, like, what do I mean by solving problems that aren't yours to solve? Well, first, let's just think about the traits or the common, I guess we could call it common traits of high achieving women. We really like to see things get done right. We have a pattern in our life of doing things, quote, right? We like to, you might be an overachiever. You have high standards. You have high standards for yourself. You have high standards for others as well. And when you are given a job or you're given a task or you make a task or job for yourself, you like to follow it through, and you like to see that you like to see a certain caliber of results, right? Here's the thing is that it's really frustrating when we can't produce the results that we want to produce because of factors that are beyond our control. Now, tends to be very common in workplaces that somewhat you might define as toxic or under-resourced. It doesn't necessarily have to be psychologically toxic, but maybe under-resourced, where you don't have the staff, you don't have the money, your workplace is lacking resources. And well, I'll give you a few examples of this. So it might be the case that you can't do what you really want to do because maybe if you have a supervisor or boss, if you are not the boss, your boss doesn't share your vision or your ambition. Maybe your staff don't share your vision and ambition despite your best efforts to impart it on them, right? Maybe company-wide systems aren't in place that are required for you to complete big projects that are on your docket. Maybe the company culture doesn't match your values. It doesn't reflect what's important to you. It doesn't match your mission, your ambition. That's another thing that we can't control, right? And that might impact your ability to get a job done the way that you really, really want to see it done. Maybe another way that this kind of shows up is staff. Maybe you might lack the support staff that you need to do your job, and it might be for reasons that are completely out of your control, such as there's no money to hire, right? or there's red tape preventing hiring from happening, whatever the cause may be, you don't have the support staff that you need to really get your job done the way that you want to get it done. It might be another kind of manifestation of this, might be something that came up with a client the other day, and that I used to experience a lot when I was a sociology professor. When we are mentoring students, and this could also apply to you in a non-academic setting if you are mentoring, if you're just mentoring support staffs, people on your team, there's only so much that you can do. You can be the best leader possible. You can be the best teacher possible. You can provide all of the framework in order to help a person succeed. But ultimately, it's their decision about what they're going to do, how they're going to act, whether they're going to show up, with 100% of their effort. You don't have control over that, right? And it's super, super frustrating when people are not showing up the way that you really want them to. And so all of these things are frustrating, and I could probably go on with more and more examples. And this is kind of one of those places where I suggest to you, can you think of some examples of things that are kind of out of your control in the workplace, but maybe you've been trying to control them? Because all of these things I've seen myself or clients in some way try to exert control over. And it's really a, what's that word? Is this the right word? Fruitless effort. It's not going to produce anything. Like with students, we can do all that we can, but ultimately it's their choice about what they're going to do. And adding in more accountability meetings may or may not change their behavior, right? When it comes to changing company culture, we can talk about it, we can complain about it, we can look at the things that we're able to control. But ultimately what I find is that a lot of women are trying to exert control over things that we really as an individual don't have control over. That doesn't mean that you lay down and just ignore everything and let everybody walk over you and you don't get anything done, or that you just ignore that problems actually exist. But I want to point something out to you, is that one of the number one sources of stress for all human beings, not just professional women, for all human beings, is this feeling like we don't have control, is this feeling of a lack of control. And it gets worse when we try to control things that are ultimately outside of our control, right? And just to be clear, so much is outside of our control. I've talked about this in other places as well, just extending it to, beyond the workplace, thinking about the economy, it's outside of our control. What's going on in the world right now, in politics. We have little action steps that we can take to make the world a better place, to voice our opinions, etc. But ultimately, things are a lot of it is out of our control. And the more that we focus on that, the more stressed out that we get, right? And the more stressed out that you get, the more, especially when it comes to your workplace, what's going on in the workplace for you, the more that you focus your energy and your attention outward onto things, onto changing people, onto changing big systems that you ultimately are not responsible for. The more that we do that, the more frustrated we become, the more stressed out we become, and the closer to burnout we become. And it also eats up, I want you to think about this as well, it eats up a ton of your time, like adding in tons of meetings into your life so that you can, try to hold people accountable to their jobs, beyond what really reasonably should be necessary. Trying to, doing other people's jobs for them, literally taking on other people's tasks. That should not be part of your job description, and ultimately is not. It's taking up so much time out of your life, and it's adding a lot of stress, because who wants to be doing that, not me, and I doubt you want to either when it comes down to it. So we're kind of at a crossroads, right? We have, on the one hand, you have high standards. You have, you want things to be done in a certain way. You want to feel in integrity with the work the work product that you are putting out. You want to feel good about that. And I would never tell you to give that up. On the other hand, we have roadblocks in our way that are preventing you from being able to produce the outcomes that are for you up to standard, right? What do we do about it? I'm going to give you the 4-step process. So, number 1, and this might be the hardest thing. I don't know. Yeah, this might be the hardest step. Number 1 is acknowledging honestly what is within your control and what is not within your control. So, what is within your control? I'm going to tell you: your behavior, your thought processes, your choices, anything involving you and what you're doing with your time, and how you're using your voice, whatever you're doing, that is within your control. What's outside of your control clearly is other people's behaviors. In most cases, unless you are in charge of establishing company culture, that is outside of your control, right? There are a lot of things that are outside of your control, especially if you work, the larger the company that you work for. And I shouldn't even just use company. I'm going to use the word organization. The larger the organization that you work for, the more that is likely outside of your control. For instance, if you work for the federal government, for an agency within the federal government, there could be a lot that is outside of your control. So the first step is that we really need to acknowledge what's within our control and what isn't within our control, and just be really honest about that. And I will also tell you that this can be difficult because we tell ourselves stories. We make up stories in our mind, especially when it comes to like high achieving women who tend to be perfectionists, who tend to be overachievers. I know that you know who you are, right? We tend to we have a a historical tendency in our life of just kind of like having allowing the weight of the world to rest on our shoulders and feeling responsible for everything and everybody. And it's, we have a pattern of trying to take responsibility for everything to a point where that feels like normal and how things should be, until it gets to the point where it's burning you out, of course, right? So my point is, when it comes to acknowledging what's within and without your control, it can be really hard sometimes because we've been telling ourselves stories that we actually have the power to control things that aren't within our control. And sometimes it really takes an external observer to kind of point out for you where your blind spots are. And that's precisely what I do with my coaching clients. But it doesn't have to be in a coaching relationship. Sometimes you might have an unbiased friend, or a friend who's willing to be unbiased, that can help you kind of process what's going on. But either way, it's good to have somebody to kind of brainstorm this with and bounce your ideas off of, so that you can get past those blind spots of where you really are trying to control things that are totally out of your ability. So once you've acknowledged, or at least begun to acknowledge, what's within and what's outside of your control, the next step is to refocus your attention solely on the things that you can control. And this might look like it's not just about putting on your blinders and putting your head down and doing your work. It might also be, at this step where you're having some tough conversations. Maybe where you're having a conversation, for instance, this happened with one of my clients I can think back to, where she was in a situation where she was very under-resourced, where people weren't getting hired. And it was really frustrating because she was trying to get some big projects done that really should be done according to a particular timeline. And it was really important to her. She had a lot of integrity in her work, but she also knew the reality of the situation, and she ultimately inside she didn't want to be blamed. She didn't want to look bad, which is totally normal. I would feel the same way. I don't want to look bad when things don't come out the way that I want them, not because of anything that I was or was not doing. Where does that leave you? It leaves you with having tough conversations, honest conversations with whomever is your boss, your supervisor at work. It might even mean, in other cases, having tough, honest conversations with your team, your support staff. Maybe in the academic context, having tough, honest conversations with your students, right? We have to have those honest conversations because we might not be able to control other people's behavior. We might not be able to control big systems, big problems in our workplace. But one thing that we can do is give voice, is honestly voice our concerns, honestly voice our needs, what we are needing and what we are missing, honestly voice our expectations of what it is that we want, and how we would like things to change. So we can have those tough conversations. And that would be part of that step 2 of focusing on what you control, what you can control, and to your best of your ability, letting go of what you can't. Now, let me have a quick sip. Step 3. Step 3 is it's time to assess the impact of those things that are out of your control. Assess how they are impacting you. Now, this impact might be, it could manifest in a lot of different ways. The impact might be that in terms of how you are able to or unable to get done certain projects at work. There might be some kind of a financial impact. There could be those tangible impacts. There could also be, and I would urge you to think about this, what is the less tangible impact of these things that are out of your control on you? And by less tangible, I'm thinking about how is it impacting you, like mentally, psychologically, in terms of your stress. And then once you have identified that impact, at least when it comes to how it's impacting you in terms of, your mental state, there are things that you can do to try to deal with that. When it comes to, if these things that are out of your control, if they're impacting you negatively in terms of giving you a lot of stress, for instance, there's things that we can do in terms of learning to regulate our nervous systems to better respond to these kinds of stresses. There might be mindset shifts that you can make that are going to help you kind of reframe these things that are out of your control and maybe give you a different perspective on them. But all of that said, this step is really about being really honest with yourself in figuring out, how is this actually impacting me? How is it actually impacting me? In a mental way, in a physical way, in a tangible way, in an intangible way. And get as clear as that with that as you can. And then, number 4, last step, decide. Now that you know what you're able to control, you know what you're unable to control, You've done all you can. You're seeing what the impact is. Are you okay with that? Can you live with it? And especially if this is in the context of your work environment, can you live with that if nothing changes? And if it's been a while, depending on the timeline of how long whatever these problems are have been happening for you, it's likely that it might be the case that nothing's ever going to change. And in fact, when it comes to people's behaviors, it's probably a safer bet to assume that people won't change, especially if you're hoping they're going to change in sort of a big way. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, can I live with this? Am I okay with it? Or do I need to make some big changes in my life? Maybe go on the job market, maybe start exploring my options. Only you can decide, right? And I don't know if you guys, some of you might be familiar with Mel Robbins and this book that she put out earlier this year. It's called The Let Them Theory. I went to see her in Boston in May. It was really cool. Anyways, she kind of has a similar perspective on this, in that, it's all about figuring out, like, being clear about what we can control and what we can't, and then making a decision about it. Because ultimately, we don't have to, if we're in a toxic work environment, for instance, not just an under-resourced one, but a toxic one, something that is really weighing on us psychologically, where you're having to put up with some sort of abuse in some way or harassment. It might be out of your control, but that doesn't mean that you lie down and put up with it. You decide what you're going to do next. And I think that most of us don't want to decide to just lay down and accept abuse, right? That doesn't make any sense. Anyways, getting back to the original question here, or the original point of this video, what we really need to do is stop trying to solve problems that aren't ours to solve. Stop trying to solve problems that we're unable to solve them, and we're not responsible for solving them. Two different things there, right? We're not responsible for solving them. You might be trying to solve it still, but also it's out of your purview. You really don't have the ability to solve them. And it just really takes this work of learning to let go of control of the things that you ultimately can't control. So this is something that I work with my private clients on. We strategize together about what are the things that they can and can't control, and what are they going to do about it. It's really helpful. You can do this work on your own, of course. You have the 4 steps, but sometimes it can be really helpful to have someone on your side supporting you, on your team, helping you see things a little bit more clearly than you can on your own with your perfectionist, overachieving, people-pleasing sunglasses, so to speak. That we have this tendency to think that we can solve all the problems, think that everything is within our control. And it is so hard to admit that there are ultimately problems that we can't solve, and things that are out of our control. And we have to somehow learn to accept it, and figure out what we're going to do based on that acceptance. So if you want to hear more about what it would be like to work with me, there is, in the caption or description of this video, there is a link to check out some details of my one-on-one coaching program called Thrive. And my email is also down there, as well as a link to book a call to have a chat with me to see if Thrive might be a good fit for you. So I'd encourage you to go check that out. And the other thing is that if you found this video helpful, please, like it, leave a comment, subscribe. All of those things really, really help me get seen by more people that need to hear this message. So thanks again, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.